In this spiritual critique, I'll be questioning, criticizing another of my favorite books. And I want to clarify that anything that I criticize in this section is because I'm interested in it. It's because I'm working with it. For example, this book is the biggest influence in my life at this time. And so it's, first of all, good to remember that anything in language is imperfect, that anything in thought is imperfect. And so as part of iterating or evolving anything in our sphere that has to do with language or thought, and they go hand in hand, you cannot think without words, it's useful to understand their innate flaws and to pull them apart and see what makes sense. So I was just listening to this little bit on my walk and thought we'd pull it apart.
What the future promises, the moment that's actual, this here now, has nothing to do with yesterday and what may happen tomorrow.
So this here now has nothing to do with yesterday. Hello. This body, yesterday, comes into the present moment. I heard about this book yesterday, and if I hadn't heard about it yesterday, I wouldn't be listening to it today.
As long as we react unconsciously to the events of life, focusing primarily on that, there, then, we aren't even seeing what's right in front of us.
So here we have a lot of either or, right? If you're aware of something in the past, then you're not aware of something in the present. Now, there's something to that in the sense that, it's been proven that multitasking doesn't actually work. What we're doing is just rapidly moving our attention from different tasks, and it takes a certain amount of effort. But, if we're fully focused on one thing, we're not focused on another thing. But if some of these statements, you listen to them and you say, is that true? Is it not? It's always both, by the way. And then you think, well, maybe that's true. But then try and say a sentence with no reference, like at any at any moment, you're on a sound, right? So if you don't string the past and the present and think about the future, what does moment, what does the moment mean, right? This book makes no sense unless you can hold a sentence together. And because he's not reading the sentence in a jumbled gibberish of all in the moment, right? Because he could combine all the sounds of the entire book and just say, and say that's the book, right? But the meaning and the comprehension comes from remembering the past, referencing the present, referencing our past, and referencing the future. So, it's what I'm mostly in antithesis around with the author and the reader, who is very passionate about the material, is the simplicity, the certainty, and the arrogance of absoluteness, right? You will hear the author and the reader say multiple times around very complex issues, having made a statement, It's that simple. It's that easy. That's the way it is. Okay, enough said, right? In the author's mind, right? But of course, the author's mind is incapable of grasping much of the complexity of life. There is strength in diverse perspectives, right? You might ask someone living in Alaska, how's the temperature in your world? And they'll say cold. You might ask someone in Brazil, how's the temperature in your world? Hot, right? You know, you get depth perception when you look at things from a variety of different valid perspectives, including this author's. This is a brilliant book with a lot of good impact that, just like everything else, is wrong, incomplete, contradictory, nonsensical a percentage of the time.
Instead, we are in a mentally driven dream spell, recoiling from ghosts of the past.
So when he says a mentally driven dream spell, what is he in, right? What does it take to conjure a mentally driven dream spell? You have to be in. We're all in mentally driven dream spells, right? Well, what's a spell? What's a dream? What about, a mentally driven reality, right? If we look at what our experience of reality, and it's a good point that philosophers have made, that the only thing that is absolutely certain is that I'm aware. What I'm aware of, is it a hologram? Is it a virtual reality? Is it a video game? Is it a fantasy? We don't know any of that for sure, right? Could be a beautiful dream, a very complex dream, a very compelling dream. Could be somebody else's dream. Could be any number of things. But the only thing we can be absolutely certain of is that we are conscious. And much of our consciousness is framed in language, because a third of our consciousness is thought, and a third of our consciousness is feeling, and a third of our consciousness is sensation, right? If something is not physically affecting our senses right now, then it's a thought, right? It's in a memory. It's a portion of our biology, and they all ultimately go together, but it's a portion of our biology that is holding the sensation in a pattern, right? Because what memory is a sensation, a vibration of energy, light, sound, taste comes in, and we give it a name. Otherwise, we're not conscious of it. If we don't give it a name, we forget it. We become unconscious. And the name is a symbol of a pattern. And then we file the name and we correlate it, like at this time, at this day, this is happening, etc. We file away the name. And then we create a replica, a little model of those sensations somewhere in our field, somewhere in our physiology, somewhere in our energetic space. They haven't found exact memories, right? Because there have been people with good memories where they find that like 90% of the brain is dead. So how are they finding them, right? So they haven't found the place, right? But somewhere in the field, heart, mind, and body, there's a memory that's stored. And when we say, remember when the house caught fire, those are just words. Remember, what does that mean? It means locate in the biology the sensations where we see the images, we have the thought, maybe we smell the smell, right? And because it's stored in our body somehow, right? And that's stored in the present, right? A memory is in the present. And the reason we store memories, the why we link the past into the present and into the future, is because it helps us track more complex patterns. Like, why does Ray Dalio, one of the world's most successful hedge fund managers, now in semi-retirement, but why did Ray Dalio go back 500, 1,000 years and study economics over time? Well, the reason is simple, right? Some trends take roughly 70 years. Some trends happen, every 20 years. There are a number of trends, but you can't see the pattern and thus predict the future, which is critical for investing, unless you have data in the past that allows certain cycles to be visible, right? For example, if every minute my hand goes down and goes up, if I'm totally in the present moment, the hand goes down and it's like, oh, there's a hand, and then there it isn't, and then that's it, right? There's no awareness of pattern. And if you ask someone, you can't outside of time, right? Because you couldn't complete a sentence, but theoretically, if you ask someone what's going to happen in a minute, after this has gone on, for the last 3,000 minutes, they're not going to, what do you mean a minute? You in order to predict the future, which is useful if you're trying to catch a train, if you're trying to jump out of the way of a car, you have to see cycles of energy. And, and for that purpose, we build memory of thoughts, et cetera, et cetera. So,
past and projected future phantoms. This is no way to live. In fact,
so a critical judgment, this is no way to live. Is it a way to live? Well, of course it's a way, right? If millions, if not billions of people are living that way, then it is a way to live, right? It's a way. Is it the best way? Well, I think it depends on, knowing what the goal is, right? The ego is often trying to maintain a sense of its own identity, its own boundaries, its own identity, etc. And so if the ego is trying to maintain its sense of identity, and an identity is an I that attaches to a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, then repeating our thoughts in that pattern strengthens the identity. So for the ego that trying to figure out who it is, what's going on, it's a way to not only live, but strengthen its own identity, right? For someone seeking to transcend the ego, to not get rid of it, but to move beyond it at times, well, then it's still a way to live, but it is not a way to live while transcending thought.
it isn't.
And by the way, you can pick apart everything that I say and find nonsense in it as well. And it's good to do that if I'm someone that you respect. Meaning if who I am and what I do is important to you, significant to you, like you're changing your life in some way because of what you're, listening to from me, then it's useful to, expose all of the nonsense in everything that I say, right? So because I'm listening and thinking this through, it's useful for me to expose the nonsense in this book.
Living at all, because the vibrational resonance of what life really is cannot enter time.
That's a big statement. The vibrational resonance that life really is cannot enter time. So first of all, you have to have an opinion of the definition of what life really is, right? And this author has just decided that what life isn't is the 95% of the human experience, right? Do you know any human being who is outside of time? I don't. I've never heard of one. So if the real reality, according to the author, is outside of time, then, well, I guess the human experience isn't the real reality, says one human being, right? But since the author is in time, right? How much time did it take him to say that? Well, it takes a little less than 30 seconds. We'll go back 30 seconds to show that we're in time. We'll play it again.
We react unconsciously to the events of life, focusing primarily on that, there, then. We aren't even seeing what's right in front of us.
And that's not true, by the way. You know, here I am, this is right in front of me. That's there then, right? We just listened to that, there, then, right? A little bit in the past. And, you know, there's something right in front of us. So, you know, that it's not, you know, you do have to shunt attention, you know, but you can develop a complex pattern where you are aware of what's going on in the present, and you can embellish the pattern with what's likely to go on in the future and what has happened in the past. And the people that teach us the most are the best at doing this. They show us, for example, if you deplete your immune system, and if you catch the coronavirus, and if you do this and this and this, and if, you know, then you're likely to get sick, right? And they compose a pattern based on data in the past, data in the present, and probabilities in the future. But if you do this, this, and this, in this way, you're unlikely to catch the virus. And that's exactly what we need to know. We need to know what we need to do and how to do it so that we reduce unnecessary suffering and promote sustainable well-being.
Instead, we are in a mentally driven dream spell, recoiling from ghosts of the past and projected future phantoms.
Now, that's also, you know, the negative version. Some people are in mentally driven dream spells, or dream spells that are mentally driven, or their mind, thinking about their first kiss, you know, etc. So it's not, you know, it's when you dream about something. And by the way, there's a tremendous amount of science that points out just how important dreams are, right? That children dream a lot because that's how they develop, right? In other words, if the author had not been in a mentally driven dream state in infancy and childhood, he would not have developed his brain to the point where he could criticize mentally driven dream spells.
This is no way to live. In fact, it isn't living at all, because...
Now that's a big one. It's not living at all, right? You and me, no life. It's not, we're not even living at all. Well, you know, this is also generally the problem with monologues, right? It's the problem with this monologue. It's the problem with our cultures, our cults, protocol for communication, right? There's a lot of monologues. And in many cases, unfortunately, because we don't teach people how to think, we teach people how to kind of allocate attention, often based on authority. The more confident a reader is, the more confident a speaker is, the more respect, the more we attend to them as kind of a group of sheep, so to speak. And this is a very confident reader, very emphatic, very clear, very crisp. He's worked on this material very carefully. It's a technology. And he's delivering it, precisely, right? It's just important to know that it doesn't necessarily make any sense or a lot of sense. It isn't necessarily useful, depending on what you want to do with it.
Because the vibrational resonance of what life really is cannot enter time.
Okay, so all of what he's saying isn't what life really is, right? So why are we listening to it, right? What's the point? If everything in time, which is all spoken word, isn't the real thing, so to speak, then why sell a book of words, right? Why not just hang out in the real thing?
Our current time-based experience is a perceptual hell guarded by the bars of our unintegrated fear, anger, and...
So, first of all, when he says our time-based awareness is hell, he's talking about all human experience, because all human experience is taking place in time. Now, in dream time, it's sped up time. In lucid dreaming, it's expansion and contraction in time. The experience of time, even not dreaming, speeds up and slows down. But every moment of the human experience, of where we are conscious, which means that we have a pattern of language that references, a pattern out there. He's saying that that's all hell. And of course, it isn't, right? Some people are very happy most of the time and think, constructive thoughts, etc. Other people are quite miserable in the timescape that they create most of the time.
And grief. It doesn't take us anywhere.
Now there's another thing. So the timescape doesn't take us anywhere. But of course it does, right? This second takes me to this second, which takes me to this second. This word takes me to this word, right? Everything in the timescape takes us towards something else, towards the next thing. It takes us everywhere, right? It doesn't take us anywhere, says the author. In fact, it takes us everywhere, right? Everywhere we can imagine. Let's actually caveat that, right? So if you can imagine it in time, then first of all, your consciousness is there. It is taken there by your imagination, right? If you can imagine it, you are already there. And if you can imagine it and figure out a step-by-step path back to where you are, you can go there, right? If I can imagine having a $500,000 401k plan by age 70, then I can backtrack and look at the steps from today that might generate that in the probability field. If I can imagine it clearly, I have to sign my name, I have to write a check, or I have to type this password in the app, I have to send it, I have to set up, I have to sign up in this institute. If I can imagine it, I can get there in many cases, right? Physically, right, in many cases. But if I can imagine it, I can go anywhere in my mind. And if I imagine it clearly enough, something that the author actually alludes to in a different point of the book, if I imagine it clearly enough, then I feel as if I'm already there, right? My senses even, if I imagine a lemon, right? My senses, my mouth develops chemicals. And My emotion reacts, oh, fresh lemonade, no, has a reaction, right? And so, of course, the timescape can take us places that are possible within the timescape.
It never did.
Now he says it never did take us anywhere. So what's the point of it? Like, is the author saying that evolution is flawed? That we developed this absolutely meaningless sense of time that doesn't take us anywhere, that can't take us anywhere, and never did, right? It was a complete waste of life to develop the timescape, right? He's not asking, has time ever taken you anywhere? He's announcing, it never took you anywhere. Despite you look back and you thought, well, yesterday took me from my bed out to work and then back to my bed. That's where time took me yesterday. And today it took me into the studio to make this video. Time did that. You can't move into a studio without time, right?
It never will.
It never will take you anywhere. But time just did take us somewhere. It took you into my mind. It takes you into his mind. It takes you into your mind. That's where time just took you.
In time, nothing authentic happens.
Oh. So that could be true, first of all, right? You just have to define authentic. Now, here's how you make it true. It's easy. Authentic equals that which happens outside of time. Well, authentic equals anything that happens outside of time. Okay, so now you can say that nothing authentic happens in time. That's pretty self-referential and self-evident. The trouble is, what's outside of time? Words aren't. Well, you can't answer that question outside of time because you need words to formulate a thought, and thoughts take time. So, if nothing in the human experience can be authentic, meaning if it's impossible by the definition of authenticity according to this author, if it's impossible to have an authentic human experience, then it's a meaningless word, right? Why are we talking about something that not a single human being can or ever will experience or ever has experienced? It's meaningless, right? Next subject, right? We're all human beings.
We only think it does.
So at least he's predicted that, right? I thought human beings could have an authentic experience based on the actual dictionary definitions of authenticity. But now I learn I'm only thinking that I could have an authentic experience. In fact, luckily I have the author on hand to enlighten me. In fact, my experience of this author is inauthentic, and their experience of me is also inauthentic because they're in time, like me and you.
The good news is that although this may be the only quality of experience we are currently aware of, it's definitely not the only experience available.
Well, if human beings can't have an authentic experience, I'd go along with that. I would say that, and just out of, I would say that we probably could have experiences that we're not currently aware of. I think that's a given, right? Reality is far more complex than we can possibly imagine. Now, just so that we don't, dip into playing too much of an excerpt, right? Because the purpose of this is, I guess, to shatter grandiosity. Like there's a real tendency in me and in so many of us to look for somebody who knows what's going on, right? It's very hard to figure out in a very complex reality. For somebody who knows what's going on and will tell us, right? And it's very common to gravitate towards alpha males who exude confidence because it looks, and particularly if they have some money and some sex and some health, right? Because that's what people want. Like, I want that, right? But it's not necessarily going to take us there. What's going to take us there is figuring things out in time, figuring probability fields out, etc., and learning what works for us and paying attention to our experience rather than sublimating. So let's go forward a little bit so we're not just going on a whole chapter, and let's just see what else we find. In fact, let's go a whole chapter forward and let's see this.
The Presence Process, Track 2. The Pathway of Awareness and 7-Year Cycle. The Pathway of Awareness. Acknowledging and operating in line with a pathway of awareness that's native to all humans is why the Presence Process is perceptually impactful, oftentimes obvious, and, considering all that is accomplished, borders on effortless.
Okay, well, there's not much that one can say about that. There's an idea in time of a 7-year process, and then there's another idea that the presence process, which, by the way, isn't the presence process, right? It's done differently. I do it differently than you do. So it's not it's our unique version of reacting to this, to this book.
Within this text, we call this the pathway of awareness. Our experience manifests mostly through an unconscious application of attention and intent along this pathway.
So most of our experience manifests along an unconscious intent, right? That's probably, you can certainly make a good case for that, with a lot of, what's going on. We're not encouraged to be particularly conscious. On the other hand, I think you could say most things occur, somewhat consciously, right? I want some food. I want, we do have conscious intents as well. So you can say both are true. Let's go forward a little bit.
The third step along the pathway of awareness, the physical realm. Curiosity is necessary for us to make the effort to take baby steps into a world that matters to us.
I don't think so, right? I don't think curiosity is necessary to take baby steps into a certain world. Desire may be necessary. Fear may be necessary. Like, I'm afraid of the old world, so I have to take baby steps into the new world, right? Something may be necessary, but I don't think, in my own experience, it isn't curiosity. Like, I'm not making this video, which is a baby step into, this particular, stream of spiritual critique. It is a baby step, just a couple of videos like this made already. Did I do it because I'm curious? Mostly, I would say frustrated, right? I'm tired of the grandiosity of so many of these, spiritual authors that just go ahead and, spout out their versions of things and, don't have to sit down with a critic and discuss something like this, right? And very few of them want to, right? If anyone does want to and would enjoy being critiqued in this way, reach out, please. But most people that want their view to be accepted, as the view, the way, including myself, want other people to just say, "Oh, what a great way," right? And yet, it's these people are never around when the way doesn't work, right? When the psychic or whatever it is says, go forth and do this, and it'll all be a wonderful year, and then your car gets stolen. If you call the psychic, and say, well, I thought you said it was a wonderful year. My car got stolen. I got COVID. I did this. And they say, oh, very interesting. Oh, there's a past life about that. And they go on. But, they don't get the car back, and they don't get rid of the COVID. And so is it useful? Is it useful? And, it's, that's part of so it's not curiosity as much as irritation. That's one thing. And then there's also service, right? So there's irritation, and there's also service. For example, knowing how I have at times gotten hooked into a certain author or a certain path that hasn't delivered the goods, hasn't facilitated the well-being I was looking for. I want to provide, a clutch, for people that can be a little bit more neutral around some of these things, so they can say, well, like I tried this book and my life immediately improved. So I'm not going to stop doing the breathing exercises that I learned in this book because I am skeptical of much of what the author says, because then my well-being, would be secondary to ideas, right? And in fact, I feel great after doing the 15-minute breathing exercise that I learned in this book. So I am grateful that I feel great so much of the time, thanks to this book. And it made enough sense amidst all of this that I was willing to give it a try. And I felt good enough giving it a try to try it again, right? And so, that's the piece. I also, having listened to the whole book, I am convinced that the author and the reader are both believers in what they're saying. I think they believe what they're saying, and that in some way, it's been useful for them. Well, certainly the breathing has, and this is kind of their bundle of words around that protocol. And so I don't think any of this is malicious. The fact that, they're proselytizing right and left on how to live and how not to live and what's worthwhile and what isn't, and that nothing in time, no human being is or has ever been authentic. They may not have extrapolated their own statements. They may be looking at an incomplete puzzle. I may be looking at an incomplete puzzle, right? You are absolutely certainly looking at an incomplete puzzle, because we all are, right? And so, we're just jumbling around. So, I think that's enough for now. But if you want to dethrone, if you want to kind of take down, whatever it is you're most attached to, I've got to be at this workshop, I've got to be with this, this is the enlightened this, whatever it is, just do this. look at the counterpoint. Every single thing that anyone can say, including this, can be proved incorrect. So, take your deities off of their pedestals, incorporate the bits of code, the bits of energy that work for you, that facilitate your flow and well-being, and have fun tearing the rest into chaos and creating something new that you will eventually tear into chaos, tear apart. Again, because whatever you create will eventually stand in your way of creating something more, right? And so it's this constant paradox, that which allows you to survive stops you from taking the next step, right? Nothing fails as hard as success, past success. What worked then, what let you get here won't take you there, right? And that's the case with our beloved books, with our beloved ideas, with our dogmas, with our truisms. But they may still be helping us now, right? So this book is still helping me now. It's helping me transition through addictive anxiety into a sense of self, into a sense of joy, into a sense of containment and presence.